Racial Justice Rising is pleased to welcome you to our May 2021 program with Whitney Robbins called Upsetting Expectations, Looking at Black Contemporary Art. Whitney is an artist, an athlete, a teacher, a student, a naturalist, and nonprofit leader who chases ideas and advocates passionately for social justice in her community, which I've learned is Coleraine, but probably in many other communities here in the Valley.
Mostly Greenfield.
Oh, mostly Greenfield.
Yeah,
and Whitney does have a studio, an art studio here in Greenfield. And she has done, from what Gloria has told me, some wonderful work with Gloria's children who come for the Twice as Smart programs, which is something that we all treasure, these students that come and learn how to do different things and experience different things. So our monthly programs are free. Donations always welcome. These programs are supported in part by grants from these following local cultural councils: Amherst, Ashfield, Bernardston, Buckland, Charlemont-Hawley, Conway, Deerfield, Gill, Greenfield, Heath, Montague, New Salem, Northfield, Orange, Rowe, Shelburne, Warwick, Wendell, and Whately. And all these local cultural councils are supported in part by the Mass Cultural Council, a state agency. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Whitney.
Great. Thank you everyone for taking time on this hot evening in Greenfield. I don't know how it is in other places that people are tuning in from. Hi, Dad. Glad to have you. Anyway, I'm really excited. I've been working on this project for over a year because I was going to do this in person last year. And then I said, well, can't we just wait until we can do it in person again? And here we are. So I figured, let's do it now. Let's start the conversation. Doesn't have to be a perfect one. So I just wanted to, before I start sharing my images, I wanted to let you know that I am an artist and I love art and art history. And that's just a passion of mine. I think it's an incredible way of making sense of the world. It's a visual language that is uniquely human. So, and in picking the artists that I picked to share with you, I really tried to pick ones that I have been able to stand in front of their work and experience it personally. There's a few exceptions, but so while I really hope to honor the artist's work and their words, I at least have been able to have been in front of most of the work and I've been very moved and inspired by these artists. And a lot of them are MacArthur geniuses. So they have done amazing work. So without further ado, I am going to share my screen and we're going to start that part of it. So
Whitney, did you want to say a few words about the chat before we got started?
Yeah, thank you. You can all help me out by, when I ask questions, responding, so we don't have too many awkward silences. But if you're more comfortable responding in the chat, my friend Elizabeth is going to be helping with that, and she can see questions or comments coming through, and then she'll let me know. So don't hold back. It's not going to distract me. Like, the more thoughts that can be flying around and being exchanged, the better. Yeah, thank you, Lizzie, for that. All right, so I am going to share my screen and let's see, change. Share. Okay, so So upsetting expectations. I will explain, that's actually a quote, and I will explain that at the end. It's a Kara Walker quote. So I'm really thrilled to be doing this program for Racial Justice Rising. And here are my objectives. But first, let me share this great quote. I have to try to move my people. There we go. Got it. So today we are about opening up questions, not being so sure of ourselves, not pretending that we've got everything right. It's about staying open, knowing that something could change to push our culture forward, push intellectual inquiry forward, and also get closer to understanding other people's cultures. And this is by Fred Wilson, who will see some more of his art later. So these are my objectives. Oops, sorry. Looking at Black contemporary artists can foster dialogue as we slow down to deconstruct images and appreciate the act of seeing. Allow us to think symbolically and metaphorically about race and racism. Make us see and feel new things. Help us make connections between the past and the present. Challenge stereotypes and keep us honest, and allow us to practice openness, curiosity, and critical thinking. We'll revisit these at the end and see how we did. So this is our first piece we're going to look at. It's by Martin Purier, and he makes these incredible handmade objects that are often very abstract. This one actually, so it's a handmade ladder. It is 36 feet long, and I got to see this in Fort Worth after teaching about this image for many years, and then I got to stand in front of it, and it was even more majestic in its presence. So it is called a ladder for Booker T. Washington. And what you might not be able to see from this image is that the ladder is suspended. It is neither on the ground nor touching anything in the air or the sky. And so I want to start our conversation by thinking about, here's another view of it. So who was Booker T. Washington? That's my first question. My second question would be, why would his ladder look like this? So this is your time to let me know some thoughts. Who was Booker T. Washington? Why would his ladder be imagined to look like this? And just unmute yourself and help me out and share some ideas. Or put it in the chat and Elizabeth will let me know.
Who's lifting people?
Hey, wait, can you hear me?
Yes.
So Booker T. Washington, as far as I can remember, he was like an educator, an author, and he advised several presidents and
Yes.
was a leader in the well, at the time they called it the African-American community, but for the last generation of Black American leaders. And he was born into slavery, right?
Correct. So anyone else want to fill in? That was awesome. Thank you, Lizzie.
He was also very much in favor of work
Yes.
as the path forward, and he was particularly kind of trade school work.
Yes.
So he looked to that. And I think of him in contradiction to W.E.B. Du Bois, who was more interested in the intellectual success of Black people and felt that Booker T. Washington was focusing too much on sort of moving from the bottom and not enough attention to the possibilities for Black people, the talented 10th.
Thank you. Yes. So then the next question, why would his ladder look like this? Not on the ground, not, and getting smaller. It goes to about a 1-inch rung.
Before we jump to that, there is one other thing in the
Okay.
chat related to the first question, and that was from Jan Mayer, who says
Yep.
that the author,
Oh, sorry.
Washington may have been the author from Up From Slavery.
Yep. Yep. Great. Thank you. So how would you get on a ladder that isn't on the ground? Not resting on anything, it's suspended. So it's a wonderful metaphor. The object itself is handmade in the way that Booker T. Washington perhaps promoted those skills and that self-actualization. It is crooked. It is essentially perhaps functional, but perhaps not functional. So it's a kind of a great metaphor for looking at the history of, ideas and advancement for Black people. So a beautiful piece. I hope people get to see it. And then I'd like to ask you, what does your ladder look like?
Marjorie just added that to get on the ladder, one would have to take a leap.
Yes, a giant leap. And that all ladders, are not created equal. And so I think this is a great way to start our conversation.
I think it's interesting too that it gets narrow towards the top, like it starts to lose its functionality the higher up you get, so it narrows, which feels pretty metaphorical too.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, so we're going to move on to another artist. Our next artist is Jennifer Packer, and a much younger artist. Purier is 80 years old. He's at the end of his career making beautiful objects, and Jennifer Packer is in her mid-30s. So got to see this amazing painting. It's rather large at the Art Institute of Chicago. And I know a lot of people aren't comfortable looking at art, don't know really how to approach it. It's not their thing. They don't know if do I like it? Do I don't like it? And so the best question to ask yourself when you stand in front of any painting is, what do you see? So that's my question to you. And anything from a mug to colors to textures. So just either put it in the chat or just shout them out.
I see two people, I think two people sort of semi-reclining. You can see the feet of one person and the other one has a blanket over them.
Great.
I see a newspaper.
Yep, great.
The colors look very muddy to me.
Mm.
You can
Yes.
actually see the feet of both of the men. The one who's lying in the forefront, he's wearing sandals.
Uh-huh. Oh, good observation.
Yeah.
Your phone, Carl.
And the other one's barefoot.
Yeah. So, the colors are, very contrasting, the bright red and the green.
Red. Yeah.
Yep. Some areas are really soft and wiped out, and then others are sort of scraped. And so there's a nice play of line, as well as sort of field.
When I look at the second person more closely, he seems to have two faces. You look at he's got a face forward, and then if you look, there's another face behind his head.
Yeah, I see that too. Almost like it's moving.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the great thing about this question is every time someone says what they see, we all see it also. So it's a wonderful collective way of seeing together. So remember that as we move forward.
You know what I'm noticing that I didn't, because I looked at this last night when we were doing the dry run, is the siding of the room that they're in looks very much like a cabin. It looks like, you know, it's not, it looks like either shiplap pine or, you know, it's not finished. The walls are not finished.
Right.
It's very rustic.
Yeah. I see that
I
too.
keep focusing on that circle that's down there in the right lower corner.
Me too. I think that's very mysterious.
What's the name of it?
It looks like a fan to me, like a little fan.
Oh,
The-
yeah.
The
Yep.
name of the piece is called Graces.
Graces?
Graces from 2017.
Ah.
Yeah.
So Whitney, I'm really struck by the difference between the two pieces of art that you've shown. The first one is so easy for me to see,
Uh-huh.
and the second one is I feel like, wow, I'm only getting 10% of what I might get if I saw it in person.
Wasn't it?
Yeah, I think that's true. So let me share you two other Jennifer Packer pieces. Oh, first I'll share this quote. My inclination to paint, especially from life, is a completely political one. We belong here. We deserve to be seen and acknowledged in real time. We deserve to be heard and to be imagined with shameless generosity and accuracy. So here are two more beautiful paintings. Her portraits are of her friends. And in looking at these, just, you know, what's the mood? What's her sensibility?
It down.
Repose. They're both relaxed and calm and comfortable and maybe a little tired.
Yep, maybe from modeling.
Yeah, I don't get comfortable or calm as much as kind of worn out or weary.
I love that. Sorry, go ahead.
It looks quiet to me.
I like the again the hands, the feet, and the faces are very specific, and then the rest is really washy. I think she does amazing things with oil paint. I believe on the pink one that the hat is just the raw canvas. So I'm very, very struck with the tenderness of her work.
Tenderness, what a good word. Yes.
Yes.
I was thinking that the one in yellow particularly looks so tender. He just looks almost beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great.
Whitney, a couple comments. In the
Oh,
chat.
yeah. Yep.
So actually back to the first artist, a couple comments.
Oh, okay. Do you want to go back to the ladder?
Yeah, just one, I think one comment was really interesting, which is, what about the room? It looks like a prison cell.
Yeah, that's an interesting observation.
And then another comment about this piece was the ladder wouldn't get you very far or help you get to the top.
Awesome.
And then for the next artist, people really were struck with just how intense the red is. And one person mentioned that it's the color of blood.
Oh,
Right.
and I thought these two men are very well read.
Awesome. So another, before we leave Jennifer Packer for the day, I've been interested for a long time in how I present or protect humans in the work. It's not figures, not bodies, but humans I am painting. I want to know how to present a personal relationship without damaging the individual or putting them in harm's way.
She's really good, isn't she?
Well,
So this is a little different. I am going to, Michael, can you mute everybody for me? Thank you. So this is a video clip, and I apologize, the sound isn't terrific. So it's from PBS's Art 21, and it's called Thick Skin, and it's about the artist Nick Cave. And I thought it was important for you to hear from him directly about his work. But a couple of things in case you can't hear it that well, I've got to build a thick skin and operate in a world that could work against me instead of for me. Lashing out for me becomes the impulse to create. So here's the video.
Cranbrook Academy of Art is where I did my graduate studies. It was a bit shocking, I think, at the beginning, because I was the only minority there. This is in 1988. I just considered myself another artist out there amongst my peers. And I think it was difficult because it was the first time that I was confronted with my identity as a Black male. My mother told me when I was like 8 years old the complexity of what I would have to deal with. So knowing made me think I've got to build a thick skin. I've got to be able to operate in a world that could work against me as opposed to for me. What do I do with that? I have been racially profiled. I'm walking home with my portfolio from teaching. I am pulled, surrounded by undercut cops saying lie down on the floor because the convenience store was robbed down the street. That has been my reality. Get it together up here. Psychologically, I have to really get it together. And I just have to get quiet to put it in perspective and to sort of not lash out in rage. And if I do, lashing out for me is creating this. All of that becomes the impulse to create. I don't ever see the sound suits as fun. They really are coming from a very dark place. The sound suits hide gender, race, class, and they force you to look at the work without judgment. You know, we tend to want to categorize everything. We tend to want to find its place. How do we sort of be one-on-one with something that is unfamiliar?
So these are some other examples of the one made out of sticks was his very first sound suit. And so I'm curious. He says the sound suit hides gender, race, class, and they force you to look at the work without judgment. So I'm curious to know what strikes you about Nick Cave's work.
The color is incredible.
Mm.
And I'm wondering if his rage, he sees his rage in color.
Oh, I wonder.
But he says that you look at the work, it hides gender, and yet the one at the bottom is a female with a skirt on. And it's got a woman's body, so that it's not hiding the gender.
Well, not necessarily. I mean, it does have a, anyone can wear a skirt.
Yeah, but this it has a female's body. It looks like she has a breast.
Does look like it in the picture.
Yeah.
Anyone else? What strikes you?
I'm curious why he chose to call them sound suits. Is that for the person wearing it? Is that for the person on the other side of it?
I'm pretty sure, I don't know the exact answer, but I think that part of like getting it right in here is disappearing into a suit where you are in your own sound sphere. So I think that it refers to that.
I believe also that many of them actually make sound as they move. I've seen a performance of some of his pieces, and it's just that whatever they're made out of, it just makes any movement that the performer makes, it makes a sound. And I think that's an intentional choice.
I think so too. He's a dancer. I mean, so many of these artists do so many more than just what the example I'm showing you. They make video, they make photographs. These are just wildly creative human beings that we get to think about and explore their ideas with. Any comments from the chat or anyone else?
I think that this one on the left-hand side, it seems to me it's saying that we are inundated with so much coming at our faces that there's so much, too much for any of us to be able to absorb everything in our environment. And this person is overwhelmed with everything coming at him.
That's a great.
And those look like they're all spinning tops.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm gonna stop my screen share for a second and check in with everyone and see how we're doing.
Yeah, and I'll read a couple notes in the chat. So just one person, Susan, just remarked at just how incredibly original his work is. And Cheryl noted that he's created figures that we can't quite figure out, like our society, like the endlessness of racism.
Beautiful.
One of my reaction was the exact opposite from the person who just spoke, in that I saw it more as things coming out. The head part of the figure was very explosive and like it couldn't contain all that was there. So it was either literally coming out or like the head was elongated because it, so that was sort of how I experienced it. It was sort of internal, so full.
Interesting.
Great. How's everyone doing with the flow so far? Going too fast, too slow, just right? All right, got some good thumbs up.
Yeah, I think it's good to pause just so I can read the chat, and you picked up on that, so that's good.
Okay, awesome.
A voice.
Cool. So we're gonna look at. I've got us talking about 2 or 3 more pieces, but then I'll share with you lots of other artists too that just have some ideas that I want you to think about. So. All right, I'm going to go back to my presentation then. It's always weird doing this transition. So plus my cursor wants to disappear on me. Okay, so back to share screen, back to here. I want to go full. All right.
I like those comments about the head.
Okay, hold on. Okay, so, oopsie, next. So our next artist is Carrie James Marshall. And I kick myself for not going to the show that was in New York. We have a beautiful catalog of the show. And so this is, he did this series called Many Mansions. They are very large, 9 by 11 feet, really borrowed from the Renaissance masters in terms of composition and like the figures in a triangle, the kind of grand narrative that those allegorical paintings have. This is worth looking at for a bit just to kind of get a sense of like, wow, how he's putting so much information in this painting. So they all, this Many Mansions series all depict housing projects, and his figures, I think, are, Michael, can you mute everybody, please? Thank you. So we're not actually going to spend much time looking at this one. We're going to talk about another painting of his, but I wanted you to get a taste of the grandness. He's a professor at the Art Institute of Chicago. has loved, also works in many different media, video, cartooning. And I have a couple quotes of his that I think are very powerful. For me, the only way to come to terms with the lack of representation is to introduce images that contain Black figures and not Black figures that were marginal in terms of their position in the narrative, but central to the narrative. I committed myself to only making Black figures in my painting because there are not enough paintings in museums anywhere really that have Black figures as the central subject of those pictures. So this is a piece I want to discuss. I think it's fascinating. No surprise, it's called Sob Sob. It hangs at the Smithsonian. And it is also very large. It's 9 feet tall, 6 feet wide. So let's just look. Here's a detail actually that will help you see a little more and get a sense of the books on the shelf. So if you can't see it, it says Africa since 1443. And the books on the shelf, some of the other titles, I had to get a magnifying glass and look up close because it was only reproduced in a book, this one. But it has Du Bois, it has Black Women in White America, James Baldwin, From Slavery to Freedom, and The Soul of Africa. Those are a few of the titles that are also on the bookcase. So where is she? What do you make of her pose? And what do you make of the title?
I think it's really interesting how the contrast between her figure is very Black and the walls are very white. And so it seems very like this clear distinction. I don't know what that means, but that just struck me right away. It's like very light in the background and then she's very dark. And then obviously the subject matter very dark seeming, like if she's sobbing from reading about the history of Africa since, I can't remember what the date was, but a long time.
Yeah, long time, right?
I think she is upstairs near her room, and she's just been going through all of these books which are showing the horrible history that Black people have endured, and she is preparing that she's going to have to go down those stairs and face this kind of world that has treated Black people the way they have, and that's why she's sobbing. Will she be able to face this white world? I think that has to, I think the whiteness of the walls has to do with that too, that she's going into the white world that these books have told her about.
Whitney, there was a question in the chat. What is the date of this painting? And then Holly says they're thinking of the connection between the staircase behind her and the ladder that we saw earlier.
Yeah, so it's from 2013.
And I noticed that she is not actually sobbing, but thinking sob.
Oh.
If you want, I'll unmute me so you can talk. Okay. Uh-oh.
That's okay. They're in the same room. So Marjorie said she's thinking sob. There's also SOB, and we know what that means, right?
Right.
So, and one hand is open and one is clenched like a fist. So she could be feeling all kinds of things, right? And it's nicely ambiguous. Is she coming? Is she going? How long is she in this position? Carrie James Marshall, loving all things art history himself, specifically put her in the pose of the Christina's World, the Wyeth painting Christina's World, but have her facing us instead of away. Any other things in the chat, Lizzie?
Yep. So actually someone who had to leave just paid you a really nice compliment. I wanted to say how interesting Whitney's way of presenting the art, as well as being introduced to artists that I don't know. And then Tigray says, it looks like a Black person reluctantly crossing into the white world. Her feet, I'm sorry, are rooted in her culture, as noted by the wood color in the floor.
Oh, beautiful observation. Yeah, great. Well, thank you, everybody. Next image. Next. Well, we heard from Fred in the beginning, right? Fred Wilson gave us that great quote about just opening up to different cultures. So he has done so much to make us get to experience museums in a new way. So he's done a series really decolonizing museums and arranging things like where titles are. And I'll share with you a little more of his work. But I love this quote. Listen, wake up. You have a specific point of view and you're acting like you don't. And a little background on Fred Wilson was he was a museum guard in college. And he said it was amazing because here he was, one of the few people of color in the museum. And what was he protecting? What cultures was he protecting? And he was both, he was very invisible as a guard as well. So interesting, his background and where he came to thinking about curating objects. So here's an example. I have to move my people over there. Okay, I think that works. So this is a piece, cabinet making, and they are ornate 19th century chairs juxtaposed as if like looking at, for spectacle, a whipping post that was used until 1958 in Baltimore. This installation is from the Studio Museum in Harlem, but it originally was in Baltimore. So again, Wilson's inquiry, beauty, 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 beauty. I'm really interested in beauty as the ultimate visual experience, but I'm also interested in beauty in that it can hide meaning. Your visual experience can be so overwhelming that you allow yourself not to think about meaning. That tension really interests me. In a lot of my work, if I can try to bring out that tension, people have to deal with the fact that there is meaning in beauty. There is meaning in ugliness. Beauty and ugliness are not necessarily separate, but we separate them. What I'm trying to say is that it's not a flaw to see something beautiful and understand there's either ugliness or meaning within its sphere. Oops. Okay, my screen does, there we go. So here's I think a perfect example of that quote. You have the beauty of finely crafted ornate silver. And then you also have crafted shackles from slavery. And he puts them together and calls them metalwork. And he wants us to think about who served that fine silver. Why is one metal prized over another? And so this is the kind of work he does to make us think in a new way and challenge our thinking. So, and I want to share a story about Fred Wilson because I got to see his work at the Oberlin College Allen Art Museum. And I walked in the door and there was a telescope. I was like, oh, that's interesting. You don't normally walk into a museum and look in a telescope. Well, the telescope was aimed high up in the corner and it was focused on a small gold African figurine. And it just physically moved me to see how we separate and categorize and, how museums create all these biases. So that was a pretty amazing experience. And he also asks, how much profound artwork is lost due to lack of attention?
We have an interesting comment in the chat by Alan Davis. I think beauty and ugliness are culturally determined by those who have power.
It's It's a great comment. So our next artist we're going to look at is Titus Kaffar, and he's amazing. 45-year-old self-taught painter. There's two wonderful TED Talks that I couldn't recommend more. In one of them, he has recreated a Dutch masterpiece, and while he's talking about his experience in college and taking an art history class, where they finally were coming to the one chapter in the text that had anything about Black artists, and that day the professor skips right over it and says, we don't have time for that. So he comes at all this from his own self-taught experience and a passion for art history as well. This is called Behind the Myth of Benevolence. And I'll share some of his words about it. This Black woman is at once Sally Hemings, but she is also every other Black woman who was on that plantation in Monticello, and all the rest of them. The one thing we do know about Thomas Jefferson is that he believed in liberty, maybe more strongly than anyone who's ever written about it. So we're going to do a good old fashioned, well, here's a great quote also, is I think that beauty and truth are intertwined somehow. There is something beautiful in truth telling. So good old fashioned compare and contrast. Who's done that recently? So this is another piece by Titus Kaffar. Got to see this at the Yale University Art Museum. Very, very big in scale, like full size. And then Glenn Ligon, who is his elder. So Titus Kaffar, they're kind of a generation apart. I don't think Titus Kaffar could be painting the paintings he's doing if Glenn Ligon hadn't done his series. So, but let's get to the comparing and contrasting these two images, and either go ahead and speak out what is the same or what is different, what strikes you, and you can put it in the chat, and Lizzie can read those for me too. So. The I feel most colored when I'm thrown against a sharp white background is a Zora Neale Hurston quote, by the way. Someone be bold. What's the same?
Well, the first thing that I notice is the contrast of the very sharp Black background of Titus's piece with the quote of the white background of Ligon's piece.
Great.
And that's the first thing that jumps out.
Great up.
And that's hands up, don't shoot on the left.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and then you're getting the contrast in both pieces between the man's face, which is realistic, or the man and the woman. I'm having trouble seeing on screen. Their faces are painted in sort of a neo-realism, and then are abstracted by the motion and the almost cartoon-like figures that are going on. And the same thing is happening with the text, where the text is very clear and then starts to become abstracted as your eye is drawn down the page. So it's realism being abstracted by the violence, however you want to look at it. Yep.
Great.
Ruth makes an interesting comment. In the Kaffar, white swallows black. In the Ligon, black swallows white.
Yes, great observation.
Whitney, one of the things that I saw was the repetitiveness of both pieces. So the quote over and over and over again. And then with Titus Kaffar, kind of the repetitiveness of having to protest and yet another protest because of violence and death.
That's great. So the title of the Kaffar piece is Yet Another Fight of Remembrance. And I have a quote of him, of his, the title speaks to repetition. The title speaks to the kind of violence against Black people by the police that has happened and continues to happen. And we are now seeing it happen again. This painting is sort of editorialized as a painting about Ferguson. It's not about Ferguson, but it's also not about Detroit. It's also not about Minneapolis.
And I thought it was important that it got smudged, that the writing got smudged at the end. So the things that he felt were not heard anymore. You couldn't read it. Even though he's repeated it so many times, we're not seeing it.
That's powerful. I have a Ligon quote to share too. So like I said, it's the text is taken from Zora Neale Hurston's essay from 1928, How It Feels to Be Colored Me. And he has done a lot of pieces with text that featured her writing as well as other famous Black people who wrote literature. But he says, it's interesting, the texts navigate the difference between seeing and reading and the reliability of the ways in which people see and read each other. So, well, great job, class. We all get A's for our compare and contrast exercise. Lizzie, any other comments or?
Nope, nothing new.
I mean, I kind of see that in the Kaffar, the outline, you know, when a body is dead, it gets outlined on the ground. So something that I
I'm
noticed.
struck by the bodies being white in that painting.
Yes, and it's another interpretation that I read about was literally the media whitewashing the situation and taking away the power of the voice, like the mouths are covered. Yeah, great.
Turning it into a cartoon.
Yeah, exactly. Really taking all of the emotion out of it, really taking the whole experience out of it. Our next artist is Kahindi Wiley, and he amazing. This is a detail from a very large life, I think way bigger than life, and it's actually the full figure. And but I'll start with his quote though. What does it feel like to be young, Black, American, male, queer, and interested in the history of painting as it relates to the life you lead now? What does America feel like to me? That becomes the subject matter of the work if you're brave enough to just put it out there. So Wiley was born in 1977. I got to see a whole exposition of his work at the Brooklyn Museum, and it was his technicality is unbelievable. His realism, his color. I mean, it's Rococo, really. And so here, what he does is he asks his subjects. He finds models on the street, and he asks them to pick a famous work from art history that they want to be posed in the same way. And then what do they want to wear? So here are some examples.
Whitney, what does Rococo mean?
Oh, it was a style of like, you know, crazy ornate, like French foofy. It's a specific time in art history. And so this is taken after, so the image on the left is Montagna's Lamentation over the Dead Christ. And this is one of the most famous, paintings, but especially as an example of foreshortening. So I think it's really fascinating that someone chose, one of his subjects chose to take that pose.
What does foreshortening mean?
So foreshortening is so that it, if you take your finger and you measure how big the foot is, you can see that it's twice as big as the head, but we know that the foot and the head are, sort of the same size, same-ish size. And so it allows us to believe that the figure is lying down. So remember this quote, if you can only be brave enough to just put it out there. Well, he certainly has been brave enough and successful enough to get the commission to paint Obama's presidential portrait. So this hangs in the Smithsonian. It is unlike any of the other presidential portraits, that's for sure. And I just thought, I'd like to hear what people think about the portrait and, what would be in your background? What would you wear? If the flowers, by the way, represent Hawaii, Illinois, and Africa and Kenya. But I love that Obama is leaning right forward and staring at us. And so I'm curious to hear what people think.
Somehow I'm very happy that his hands are so beautifully done. I mean, he had very strong hands because he did a lot.
Any other comments about Wiley's work?
There's an interesting chat comment. His words reminded me of Amanda Gorman's line, "If only we're brave enough to see it."
Yeah.
If only we're brave enough to be it.
Yeah, I thought of that too. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
The
interesting.
Obama's face, if I didn't know he were mixed race, biracial, his face looks white to me, or somewhat white.
Interesting.
Somewhat white.
Also, the background is really coming forward, like around his legs, and just it's really coming up and almost engulfing him a little bit.
Yeah, that's
Pleasant, I would say.
Yeah, that's a great observation.
And it puts him in the world of nature, almost a kind of mythic context, as opposed to flattening him into history. It somehow makes him larger than life.
It's another great observation.
But I think he's sitting in a very traditional chair.
Yeah. Yep. In a traditional suit, but no tie, no American flag pin that we can see, right?
Right.
Yeah.
I thought that this sort of positioning amongst the flowers and the foliage was kind of putting him like in balance with nature, like in a more organic place, a more balanced place than typical white society, which is always trying to dominate nature. White supremacy culture is always in a dominant position, and this feels more balanced, which I thought was kind of interesting.
Cool.
Marjorie says it's a beautiful mix of soft and hard, an angular pose and a fixed gaze with the softness of nature.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody. Such great comments. So this is Deborah Roberts, and this is time for us to stretch and get up and strike your power pose. Okay, so everybody up and think about connecting with your power, connecting with the ground, connecting in your body. Move around, get the blood flowing. And don't go too far because we're going to keep going. got some more awesome artists to look at. Deborah Roberts was at Mass MoCA a couple years ago, and these are very large scale. They're part drawing, part painting, and part collage. And, you know, she is very much interested in making sure that our young African American, young Black kids get to be kids, and they're not over sexualized. They're not, you know, we tend to, with Black males, make them older than they are. And so she's very much about kids being kids and getting to have full childhood. And I think I have a nice quote from her too. See me as a whole human being, and if you see me as a human being, then you'll see yourself in me, and that makes us equal. So recommend looking at some of her work. Very wonderful. So I have a little bit to read about this one, because this photograph so Carrie Mae Weems has also, you know, full long career as an amazing photographer. But this photo I learned about from Ross Gay's Book of Delight. So I'm going to read a paragraph that he describes. There is a Carrie Mae Weems photograph of a woman in what looks to be some kind of textile factory, with an angel embroidered to the left breast of her shirt where her heart resides. The woman, like the angel, has her arms splayed wide, almost in ecstasy, as though to embrace everything. So in the midst of her glee is she. Every time I see that photo, after I smile and have a genuine bodily opening on account of witnessing this delight, which is a moment of Black delight, I look behind her for the boss. Uh-oh, I think, you're in a moment of non-productive delight. Heads up. So that's from Ross Gay's essay called Loitering. And so I want you to think for a second, what brings you delight, and how would you be photographed in a moment of delight? So just sort of close your eyes and picture yourself. What are you doing? All right, our next artist. Our next artist is Bill Traylor, and boy, does he have an interesting story. Born in slavery, and then a sharecropper for his whole life, living in rural Alabama. Not an easy life at all. Ended up raising 11 children. He had lots of wives that came and went, but his children stayed. So he, and then when he was 80 years old, he moved to the city of Montgomery, and he started making images in the last 10 years of his life. And he made hundreds, if not thousands of them. And so he's the first artist born into slavery to have his own major show. And it was, I got to see it at the Smithsonian, and his work just blew me away. Here are some more examples. And I want you to think about, you know, if you were to make images of the last 10 years of your life, what images make up your life story? And how, as a completely untrained artist, we're drawn to make both real and abstract images. And there's a wonderful movie that just came out on him called Chasing Ghosts. I recommend it. And it really shows where some of the, like there's a fountain in Montgomery, Alabama that kind of shows up as, and just all the places he lived and the animals he worked with. And I love the piece with the yoke. You have kind of the drunkard on one side and the preacher on the other. And I think we all have yokes, and we have different angels and devils speaking to us. So I couldn't recommend learning more about Bill Traylor.
Whitney, you've got some nice just expression of gratitudes in the chat. Some people had to leave and just thanked you for
Oh, thanks.
doing this. And then somebody mentioned that they hadn't been in the museum in over a year. And so this is reminding him of the power of art, and particularly art by Black people. Many, many thanks.
Oh, wonderful.
That's from Bill Allen, or Alan Davis, I'm sorry.
Oh, great. Great. Awesome. Well, everyone's still with me. I've got a few more artists to share, and then any questions that anyone else wants to ask. So Leonardo drew one of my favorite artists, and you know, I'll just share this quote, and then I'll share my thoughts later. But you know that you don't have all the answers, and the unknown is the best place where you would want to be as an artist. Not knowing, that actually leads you to ask questions, and it continually feeds itself. So the next two artists I picked, I purposely picked artists that were all about their materials and all about abstraction. You know, Leonardo drew, he doesn't title any of his pieces. They're just numbers. And then when number 76 has lived its life, he'll put it in his studio and he'll reconfigure it and it'll turn into 109. And then when 109 has led its life, he's in almost every major museum collection. So many of those stay as their numbers, but he really resists narrative, resists titles. He loves not knowing. And he's another artist I discovered at Oberlin College. And he was also recently at Smith College when they had a show from the Studio Museum in Harlem called Black Refraction. So I got to see the next piece there. But these are massive, and he just collects everything and finds ways to put them together. And this is the piece that was at Smith College that is a stunner, huge. And often he's working off a grid. That's how it allows him to work so large and to make them, they come apart in pieces, but they're very provocative, wonderful palette of patinas and browns and blacks and whites. And so that's Leonardo Drew.
He was at UMass
Yes.
the year before COVID with a lot of those black pieces.
Yes, it was a wonderful show.
That was a great show.
Yep. And this is Stanley Whitney, who, so a great quote, I never think about anything but the paint. What you paint, your subject matter, you never have any choice about that. That's just who you are. But the question is what you do with it and how you treat the paint and the color. And another image of Stanley Whitney's, basically it's just a dance. Get the rhythm, get the rhythm, get the rhythm. And he happened to be Jennifer Packer's professor. And so he must have been a pretty good teacher, though he was a very hard teacher and never gave her any compliments. So she just had to go off and do her own thing. And luckily she did, because her work is amazing. But you see the color work in hers. So that's, I wanted to switch gears and introduce you to some artists that both Leonardo Drew and Stanley Whitney have been making these epic abstractions for their whole career. Leonardo Drew is about 60 years old and Stanley Whitney is 75 years old. So Njeka Akonili Crosby is someone I first discovered in a magazine. Whoa, what are those images? And I just got really excited about how she made these images. And then she also was at Smith College, so I got to experience these, the one on the left. And she thinks about creating simultaneous spaces. So she's she's Nigerian, but lives in the United States and is married to a white man. And so she uses very personal images. She uses photo. She has one family album. She said there were 8 kids in her family, and so this one family album, I think she color copies the images, and then they enter into her picture frame. So you can see, not terribly well in this because they're large paintings, very small on a screen, but I do have a detail to show you. So the ground, the chair, the shirt, the bedspread, the wall, those are all photo transfers from either her family photos or from Nigerian fashion magazines. And here's a picture of her. So her work, compared to Drew, where I want to be lost, I don't know what I'm doing, is completely the opposite. Every aspect of her compositions are planned ahead of time and meticulously rendered. So she really thinks about the multiplicity of personal spaces, using photo transfers, family albums, and portrait cloths. So there's a Nigerian tradition to have your portrait on cloths that people wear for ceremonies, weddings, and whatnot. So those are almost always in her compositions as well. And here's a detail where you can see the photo of maybe it's her, maybe it's a sister against like a fence or some kind of lattice work. And so that's in his shirt. So that's a detail from the photo, the painting on the left. So she's amazing. Look her up. Really speaks beautifully about her work and trying to capture as much of her experience of the African diaspora as possible. Our next artist, I don't have too much information about Noah Davis, but this is one of my favorite paintings I've ever seen. I've never seen it in person, so that speaks pretty highly to what kind of, I think it's just a beautiful blend of loose and tight, and there's such a sense of place. I love seeing the bottom of the feet. There's a little bit of, speed and hecticness and the smear of the background. I do know that he was a very prolific painter. He died at 32. So we don't have enough of his work, but he's a very stunning painter. Our next artist is a printmaker, Deleta Martin, and I just love the colors, the textures, the layering. Very powerful work. And we're going to end with Kara Walker, and it's her quote, "Upsetting expectations," that I use. So these are paper cutouts, and she fills whole rooms with these very disturbing tableaus from plantations in the antebellum South. And she exploits stereotypes. She really they're hard to look at. And she has, and they're a black piece of paper. Like they're cut out black. They couldn't be more of a simple way of creating imagery, and yet they're so powerful. She sort of, I don't know, she makes us squirm, and then also they're just paper. So she kind of gives us a way out too. But I wanted to share this amazing installation. She doesn't do a lot of sculpture, but she had the opportunity to make this massive sugar sculpture at the Domino Sugar Factory in Brooklyn before it was torn down. So the bottom left picture, you can see those are adults. So you get the sense that she goes up 2 or 3 stories. And a subtlety is a sugar sculpture. So she learned how to, with the help of many technicians, basically cast sugar. The children are made out of sugar. And then the exterior of the marvelous sugar baby is all sugar too. and the whole building is dripping with molasses and melting. And it was an epic project. There's a wonderful Art 21 so check that out. But I loved her quote so much. If I've done the job well, then she gains her power by upsetting expectations one after another. So back to my objectives. I hope we have done some of these things, and maybe people can shout out any of these that they want to share. And so thank you so much. I have one more slide, and that's just the name of the artist and some resources for you and how to get in touch with me. But I hope this has been enlightening, and I'd love to hear your comments.
There's a couple of comments in the chat about people I think had to leave a little early, but just expressions of gratitude. So Edie Heineman, sorry, must leave, but I really, in capital letters, really enjoyed this wonderfully presentation of and engagement with this selection of artists' works. Thank you. Beth Newman says, sadly, I have to leave. Can we get a list of the artists? What an amazing and wonderful program. Thank you. A deep gratitude to Whitney. So well done. Susan Holland says, totally enlightening and expanding. Thank you so much. Where do people find you if they would like to send you a note? And Susan Johnson says, this was great. Thank you, Whitney. Please do more.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, I want to thank you too. I think it was a wonderful presentation, and it was just like going through a museum with an
Oh.
It was wonderful. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
So you're going to show the list of artists?
Yeah, I mean, I just wanted, people to get a sense of this is what I was hoping we would do today, and I think we did it. But if anyone wanted to share a stereotype that was challenged or a way that you saw differently or felt differently, I'd love to hear that, but we don't have to do that either. Yeah, these are the artists that I presented, and some of the amazing series. I haven't actually seen the HBO series, but there is a brand new just put out in 2021 of Black art in the absence of light. So that's something I'm definitely going to be looking at. And there's my email if you want to get in touch with me and learn about more artists or do this again or whatever. Something comes to you and you're like, I need to share that.
Whitney, can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. This is Ruth Bowman.
Hi, Ruth.
Hi. I love that quote because that's the last quote that you had because, oh, not quote, the name of the series, Black Art in the Absence of Light. Oh, now that I see it, I thought it was in the absence of white.
Oh,
that's the comment I wanted to make.
Oh, well, check out that series. And I think there'll probably be some of the same artists, but many, many more. I mean, it was hard to choose because every time I turn around, I discover another artist doing amazing things. So, and then of course there's the whole, I really didn't, these are all contemporary artists. These are all famous artists. And I really didn't dive into any of the artists from the Harlem Renaissance that really predate most of these artists. So there's a lot out there. And thanks to Mr. Google, it's pretty easy to learn a lot and watch a lot of videos. Really incredible work.
Also, I want to say that just this hour and a half or whatever it is of your presentation was so interesting to me in that it was nothing about white artists or white persons or white painters, and it was just Black centric, and that is so unusual in my experience. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you for making this so accessible in so many different ways. Yeah, so thank you for that.
Awesome. You're welcome.
Yeah, I agree about the accessibility thing. And I also thought it was really interesting when you would say the ages of the artists, because it was really cool to see the difference in the generations.
Right.
And just the kind of art that people are making. And I forget the artist that did Obama's portrait.
Yeah, Wiley.
Yeah, younger, right? Or
Yeah, 45.
Yeah,
and
yeah,
he has like made a million gorgeous paintings. Like,
yeah.
I don't know if he sleeps. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, anyway, thank you so much. This was amazing. And do it again.
Oh, okay. Thank you for coming. If anyone wants the name, like take a screenshot or take your notes, because I'm gonna exit my screen share so I can see people. So anyone, and I can also email this to folks too. So if you want, just take down my email and then I'll be in touch with you. So I am going to stop my screen share.
I just want to call out one thing. Tigray asked who the paintings were behind you, and Lizzie answered that they were yours, Whitney, from your portrait series. I just wasn't sure if Tigray saw that. So
thank you.
And then more expressions of gratitude in the chat.
Awesome. Well, special thanks to Michael and Elizabeth and Emily for being my tech support, and Meredith for running it through with me before, and just really happy that you're all curious and open, and there's so much more to learn.
The second time through was even better.
Really?
Yes, absolutely.
Oh, shucks, Ma.
I think one thing that strikes me is that these are all Black artists, but their ways of expressing themselves are so different.
Absolutely.
And it's important for me, because I don't get into museums, to see this huge world of art that's accessible, as you say, through books, through online programs. It's very refreshing to get a bigger perspective than the one I've lived in for the last year.
Great.
I have to say, Whitney, if I ever was going to have or choose anyone to go with me to a museum, you would be the person, because you really helped me to see artwork in many different perspectives and ways and so forth. And I appreciate that.
Great.
Well, I also want to thank Whitney for this incredible presentation, and also Michael for being our Zoom host and keeping us on board with that, as well as Elizabeth for taking care of the chat, and for the ability that Racial Justice Rising has to do these wonderful programs. And we have some of that thank you to go to the cultural councils that I listed in the beginning of our program. We're definitely appreciative of them. And I'm also appreciative of all of the people who came and experienced this wonderful presentation. Thank you.
Well, thanks everybody. I think that concludes our evening. Again, thank you for taking time and sharing your thoughts and opening your hearts and your minds. And it's been really fun. So I hope we can do a part 2 sometime.
Good.
Awesome. All right. Night, everybody.
Good night.
Thank you. Thank you.